Welcome back. I lost a game playing the Scandinavian Defense last night, which happens from time to time. If you don't lose some games, your rating goes through the roof and the sites start to get suspicious. But hopefully, as you do, when I lose, I try to learn something from that. And I learned a little bit from this game, and I'm going to try to reinforce it as I go through it again. And decided to hit record, so maybe you can learn something too. Now, one thing I do like about the Scandinavian Defense is that, especially through the first several moves, it's pretty forcing. Very often, there's only one or two good choices for either player, according to the engine, and just according to normal human evaluation of the positions on the board. For example, here, White's only good move to maintain their initial advantage is to take this pawn. But a lot of my opponents don't do that. As I mentioned in my Scandinavian Defense video, saying why I like it so much, one of the things is that it's not very common. Most people who play chess regularly won't see this, but 1 in 12, 1 in 15 games, if that. And because they see it so rarely, they don't really see a need to prepare for it. And what I saw here was f4. It's not the first time I've seen f4. I've seen all kinds of responses to my d5 response here. But what this turns into, it transposes into bird opening Williams Gambit, I think is what it's called. It's as if White had played f4 first, and then I played d5, and then they played this, which probably isn't good in that order either. But here it's not great. It weakens this diagonal in front of the king, and it allows me to just immediately take one of their center pawns, which I remembered that I was pretty sure that I remembered correctly that was the best move. And it was. If you see from the engine, it's the only good move for black at this point. And that's what I mean by the Scandinavian being forcing opening, is that very often there's only one good move. Now here it's not the case. As you can see from the engine suggestions, White has at least 3 moves that maintain about the same level of disadvantage. And they didn't pick any of those. They picked one that gave me even more advantage. It's not a horrible move. It develops a piece, prepares, I assume, to get the knight out of the way in castle. If they had moved the knight first, then the bishop would be stuck back there. So, I mean, it makes sense for that reason. Also, looks like they may be preparing this, trying to see if I'm inexperienced enough to fall for a scholar's mate. Now, my best move here is knight to c6. I'm not entirely sure why. I think maybe it's meant to prevent d4. But I saw that this pawn is undefended, and I saw that this person might be attempting a scholar's mate. So I put my knight on f6, which was, I think, the second best move. It guards that square from the queen. It protects this pawn. It's not bad. But over the course of the next 4 or 5 moves, neither one of us played optimally. Like here, I'm supposed to play bishop to f5, or almost as good as knight to c6. Bishop to f5 adds another defender to this pawn, and knight to c6, I'm not entirely sure, but I think it prepares e5. Either way, I did the third best move, and my opponent did one of the better moves. And then the advantage starts to creep back toward White over these next few moves, because I'm not playing perfectly. I knew that when I did move this, I was preparing e5, so I played it. That turned out to not be the best. White has only one good move, and my opponent found it. It says my best move here is just to go ahead and take that one and let them take my queen. I guess, give my rook on this open file. I played one of the better moves, but again, now I'm at, as you can see, we're at 1. I was at 2.8 just a few moves ago, and the advantage indicator is creeping back toward White's favor. They played the best move here, and I didn't play one of the best moves in this point. I made a complete mistake. Now I'm supposed to play knight to d4, which in hindsight looks really nice. Not only does it's a nice outpost square for the knight right in the middle of the board, but it targets this, which I suppose forces white to do something about that. It says they would bring this bishop back to guard that pawn, the c2 pawn. Also, now that the queen's out of the way, there's not much trouble and no ramifications really for taking that pawn. I can take it, they can recapture, and then I can castle on the queen side. But I decided I wanted to go ahead and get another bishop out, so I did that. And now look, white has the advantage all of a sudden. But just like with a lot of Scandinavian moves, they only have the advantage if they play that one move or get close to 0 by playing this move. But instead, oh no, they did play the second move, but it wasn't their best one. So here, for the next several moves, I played the best move here, which was to directly challenge this bishop. And instead of trading, which would have doubled my pawns and left us pretty close to equal, they could have castled right after that. They castled first and just hung that bishop. So I'm a whole piece up. Okay, now I stayed a piece up for a while. And I didn't make the best move every turn or every move, but neither did my opponent. And I stayed at about a 5-point advantage here for quite some time. I knew I was a piece up, so a piece trade is great. Oh, I did make the best move here too, targeting this pawn. My opponent did not make the best move. And here I'm supposed to take that with the knight. You know what? This is an instructive position. Even though it wasn't, what I did really wasn't a blunder. I was worried about this knight forking my rooks. And I thought, I could take this pawn, but then they fork me. But if they did, I get the bishop and the rook for a knight. But, yeah, because I would take that. Even if they captured this, which they wouldn't because they would see that their bishop's hanging. But even if they did that, I would get the bishop. The king cannot go that way. It would have to go into the corner. Then I could take the rook. And now there's nothing here. So if they take back, I'd get their other rook. Yeah, so taking here would force a bishop move. And then probably here. And then I could trade off the bishops and then worry about this. But I was worried too much about knight capturing on f7. So I took with my rook, which wasn't horrible, but I could have done better. They went ahead and took the pawn anyway. And here it just says I should go here. Wow. Well, I didn't see that. Or just take the rook. I went after the knight. And here again, my advantage, as you've seen, is starting to dissipate. It's 3.1 now. My opponent's playing really well, and they're also playing quickly. I've left their clocks in this crop here, so you can see that they still have 7 minutes left, where I'm down to 4.5. So not going great for me. I did the best move here because my rook was being challenged. Also, I've got to do something about this pawn. It's getting too close. My opponent made the best move, which is getting behind that pawn. I made the best move, which my idea was to try to get in front of the pawn, or at least to guard that square. My opponent made one of their better moves here. And I don't realize that I'm this far ahead. And I just couldn't figure out what my best move is. The engine says to come here, which I guess threatens this rook. And it says if I did that, they would just play g4 to threaten mine. That seems like a really forcing line that I would probably mess up on. So I'm glad I didn't see that. This I probably should have just done right off the bat and blocked off that pawn for good, or at least for the time being. But I blocked the pawn with my rook, which turns out to be a blunder. And the reason I guess that it's a blunder is that now my opponent can just start moving these two pawns, which is what they did. They came after that rook immediately. I happened to play the best move here. I wasn't sure where else to go with it. As you can, rooks need long open files and open ranks, and I don't have a lot of space to maneuver. The bishop, white bishop, was guarding this square and this square. The pawn was on this square, and of course the rooks guard that square, and that pawn guards this square. So I really only had a couple of choices, here and here. Then my opponent blunders. Here it says they should have played, no, not that one, c4, hitting the knight. So the knight has to go somewhere. But they didn't see that. They didn't see their next best move. And they didn't see their third best move. So they went after this rook. Now I have the advantage again. I saw the second best thing, which was just to go here. I thought, if the knight continued coming after me, I could pick off this pawn. So that worked. And then my opponent did find c4. So I've got to take the knight somewhere. The rook is guarding this spot, so why didn't I just take the knight there? I could have traded off another piece, because look, I'm still up a minor piece. But instead, I had been worried about this pawn for a little ever since this bishop moved here, and I thought this was a way to block off that pawn. So, but that's a blunder. Now this next thing is very interesting. You see in the engine, I've let it run. Bishop to f6 is their best move. But the game evaluation called it a mistake. They played bishop to f6, which was their best move. But it's listed as a mistake because the initial low depth evaluation that the computer runs when you analyze a game didn't see, I guess, why that was such a big deal. But here there's only one. White has the advantage again, even though I'm up a piece. But there's only one move that doesn't lose, and that's this. Perhaps obviously. The bishop guards this spot, the pawn guards this spot, the bishop guards this spot, the pawn guards this spot, as does the rook. And the knight hits this one. So, really, that wasn't easy to... it wasn't too hard to find that, although I spent 30 seconds on it. And now look at my clock. I've got 1 minute and 20 seconds left. I spent 30 seconds finding the best move here. My opponent found the best move, which was to get that pawn one step closer. I can't come over to help with the king because this rook's got this file cut off. What else can I do? Now I have to just leave my rook here. I found the best move here, which was targeting the bishop. And believe it or not, white's only good move is to let the bishop go. You see what Stockfish is saying? That's white's only good move, right there. And just let me have the bishop. It says I wouldn't take the bishop. That's weird. It says I would just go ahead and take the pawn. I don't know if I would have seen that or not. But they moved the bishop, which, again, wasn't their best move, and allows me to take the pawn. But I have to take the pawn with the rook. And I think the reason I have to is because it forces a response from white. But instead I took with the bishop, which I still have a slight advantage, but the only thing I could figure out why this is a blunder is because it doesn't force the response from white, because there's no immediate threat. There's going to be a threat when I move the bishop. But I thought this was good because it also hits the knight. But it turns out to not be great. My opponent didn't play their best move here. That's not horrible. But now I can take this pawn. So they don't have connected passed pawns on the flank. I didn't see that. I saw that when I move this bishop, my rook's not protected. So I moved my king over to protect it. And I lost that advantage. And now my opponent just has to put this knight here. They're not going to see that. Why would they see it? That spot is guarded not only by my bishop, but by my knight, right? So if they go here, looks like they're threatening the rook, but no, I'm just going to start capturing stuff. But if they do that, and I start capturing stuff, now I can't move the knight because it's pinned. So yeah, they have to be able to see several moves ahead in order to think that's a good move. So they protected this pawn, which they realized, oh, it's just sitting there waiting for me to capture it. But that turns out to be a blunder because I'm not sure exactly why. I think it's a blunder because now I can move this. I don't know. I made one of the better moves here. My idea was to prepare for c5 to force this bishop to go somewhere. Also, my other idea was this bishop can't go anywhere. I've got my light squared bishop, my whole extra piece that I've been bragging about. It's just trapped here. So I thought if I do this, preparing c5, it also opens the path for my bishop. Now my bishop can get out and go places. And my opponent blundered here by going after the rook. Because now I can move my rook, I guess. That was my best move, and I did it. So it forces the bishop to have to go somewhere else again. And they put it right back where it was, which allowed me to go ahead with my plan, which was one of my two best moves. So the bishop has to move again. So now I've got the advantage, but look at my clock, 45 seconds. I don't have very much time to think about each of these moves that I'm making. It did well. I did my best move, which means this rook has to go somewhere. Actually, no. What? The engine is saying that's their best move? G5? Oh, it's changing its mind. I was going to say, because I was thinking of something like this, or I don't know, maybe just here to threaten something this way, and then bam. Unfortunately, I don't have a check here for that. That would have been great if I'd had a nice protected check and then could pick up the rook. But they saw that and they moved the rook, which wasn't one of their best moves. Now I have nearly an 8-point advantage, and I played one of my better moves, which was to bring this back, because now the knight's trapped. Except here again. They're not going to see that, right? Because just like before, if I take and they take back, I can't take back with my knight. But I can take back with my rook. Huh. I wonder why that's listed as their second best move. But they didn't do that. They just put it here. So I got it. Now I'm 2 minor pieces ahead. But my opponent's depending on their connected passed pawns. Now at this point, I know I'm ahead with these pieces, but I can't move this knight right now, right? And I've got to stop this somehow. They have 2 rooks coming down here. They have a bishop guarding a corner promotion square. I didn't play the best move. What does it say my best move here is? Bishop to f3? Ah, because this pawn can't go anywhere. It says just to give up this bishop. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I wish I'd seen that. It hits both of these pieces, and they can't really, there's no way to protect both of them, is there? Well, I mean, yeah, they could do that. But then I could move this bishop, and I would be fine. Okay, I see why that's the best move. Regardless, I just brought it back, but then they pushed g5, and they keep coming down. I made one of my better moves. This bishop was under attack anyway, so there we go. Also, I was hoping to draw this rook over here, but it didn't work. 28 seconds left. I'm having to make these moves really quickly. That was actually pretty smart on their part. It wasn't one of the best moves listed, but now I don't have a really good way to attack this king anymore. And now I realize I need this knight to help out with these 2 pawns, so I have to get my king out of that pin, which is what I do, but my advantage starts to trickle away. Also, I don't realize I have a really strong advantage here. I just know I have 22 seconds left. They played one of their better moves. Like this is their ace in the hole right here. It says I should have played rook to e3. Why would that have been great? I don't understand that. Now, I understand that if they played h6, then I could get in here, maybe. But what if I went here and they played g6, which is what it says they would play? Then I would play knight to e5. I don't know. I wouldn't have seen that, not with 22 seconds left. But I thought, like, maybe I can remove this defender and then somehow start picking off these pawns. But it just moved out of the way. And now, bishop to e4. I guess, again, to protect those two squares. But I started to realize here I didn't know how to win this endgame. And the only thing I could think of was to try to get something in front of them, or maybe here and double them. If I could double those pawns and then put a rook behind them, and I would, even if I gave up the knight for that, I would still have an extra piece. And my opponent did not play the best move here. Look at my clock, I have 13 seconds left. So now, all I have to do is get behind the g-pawn. I really don't understand, because I think they would just push it and it would be protected. But then it says I would block that with my other rook. And then they would push h7 and I would sacrifice the knight for it. And my rooks would be on either side of the g-pawn. But I have 13 seconds left. I made a mistake thinking I could trade these off and then somehow... And that's what happened. I'm still thinking I'm willing to sacrifice a knight to stop these pawns from advancing. My opponent plays the best move. I have 6 seconds left. I need to get this in the corner. But instead, I did that. Now, all my opponent has to do is this, and they maintain an advantage. But they did that. I didn't know it was a blunder, and I have 4 seconds left. So what I should have done is here. That's all I had to do. Because the h-pawn then can't advance, right? If this advances, I can sacrifice a knight for it. But I didn't see this at all. And while I was trying to figure out what to do, I ran out of time. But yeah. They were up almost +3 here. Now, remember earlier, they had a lot more time than I did. They started getting their time chipped off here too while they were figuring out these pawn advances. And so now they're down to 48 seconds. But there's no increment, so it didn't matter. But yeah, they had to find rook to f1, which I guess would have forced the knight to move. No, it says I would have just left it there and still played this. Wow. I wouldn't have found that, not with a few seconds left. But yeah. It says even rook to g8 is winning for me, because they can't advance that because I can take it. And if I played rook to g8, and they played here threatening the knight, then I could just go here. For that matter, I could probably go there and still be okay. Probably. But anyway, hopefully you could learn something from this. I'm going to move this up a little bit and uncrop it so you can see the graph. Can I go up even further? That's as far as it says it goes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you can see all the jumps in as we made those blunders and mistakes. Well, I feel like I've learned something about it. Also, this video's gone on too long, and I apologize for that. But I've learned something, especially on this end game thing, and I'm even going to spend some more time studying this whole thing. That I could have just found this, which keeps the H pawn from advancing, and the knight's ready to sacrifice itself for the G pawn if it advances. So, and better time management earlier in the game. So, thank you for watching. Hopefully you learned something. If you already knew all this stuff, then good for you. Thank you.